Everybody, today is Tuesday, November 5th. It's 3 p.m. I'd like to start Rules Administration and Procedures Committee meeting. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chairperson Ron Warman.
Here.
Vice Chair Carl Franco.
Here.
Alderman Edward J. Bug.
Here.
Alderman Dan Barrero.
Here.
Alderwoman Patty Smith.
Here.
5 present.
First item on the agenda, 24-0743, approval of the minutes from Rules Administration and Procedures Committee meeting held on October 1st, 2024. I have a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes 5-0. Clerk, are there anybody here for public comment?
No one has signed up.
Okay. And just a heads up for everybody, we're going to do things in a different order here. So items number 24-0845 and item number 24-0847 is going to be moved to the end. So we're going to do everything else and then pick those two up at the end there. So, excuse me. First item on the agenda, 24-0770, an ordinance amending Chapter 6, Section 6-2 to the Code of Ordinances regarding complimentary licenses.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, pull it over in the middle.
Better. Jennifer Stallings, City Clerk. So the reason we're here today is that we have had the title of our license as complimentary, as you probably read in the packet. That is inappropriate according to the state standards. So we are proposing to name it more in line with what we intended anyway, that it is in use, that it be in use by barbershops, salons, or spas as part of packages. So I can go and get a package, hopefully someday, pedicure, manicure, champagne, as part of the service. And you're welcome to come along with Alderwoman. So that's the primary change. We have not had anyone apply for this license up until last week, I believe. So as we were talking about making this change per guidance from the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, we did receive an application. So it was actually very good timing. We didn't actually issue a license under this title to anyone. So now we can kind of start fresh if it's approved, if the change is approved, and we can issue it correctly so that the applicant, if she's approved, will not have any problems with the state. And along with this change, what we did when we asked to approve this type of license was we also asked to assess a $350 yearly fee. So we did that independent of the regular fee schedule. So we are asking, as opposed to putting through another resolution, implementing a fee under the new name, we just asked to attach it to the end of this ordinance under the new name. So then the next time we make changes to the fee ordinance for liquor, we will be sure to incorporate this into that ordinance. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments from the committee?
So moved.
Yes,
Alderman Bug.
thank you. So you said you only had one inquiry to date. Are we going to proactively reach out to some of the salons and businesses like that, or we just kind of wait when they apply?
You know, we've had other inquiries. We haven't actually had anyone complete the application process. I think that the problem has been historically with someone completing the application process with it is that it's still the same process as everyone else has to go through, although there are some things that aren't necessary, like maximum occupancy. You know, it's not a bar restaurant, it's just their salon. So there are some different requirements, but for the most part, it's the same big application with the same, some people describe it as onerous, I guess, requirements to go through the process to apply. So to answer your question, I have talked to several salons and spas, and we encourage it. But this is the first one, and she's very enthusiastic about it. So I'm hoping that once Once she's able to present to the PHST committee and then, introduce herself, hopefully to COW, that might get the momentum going with this type of license and get the word spread that way, hopefully.
Okay.
I do have a question.
So,
Go ahead,
Oh,
Alderman.
sorry.
so just for our reference, does only one manager and/or owner have to do the Bacchus training, and then with this type of salon versus, a bar or whatever?
Yeah, so with the requirement with this is that a Bassett trained employee of the licensee has to be present at all times that alcohol is consumed. So if you have the owner, who's generally, if it's a small salon, going to be present when alcohol is being provided, then that's kind of the requirement. We have to have someone there. But the good part about this type of license is that there is the limitation on how much alcohol can be provided
right.
too. So the likelihood that someone's going to be overserved, depending on who it is, with 2 drinks is not real high.
Yeah, I think possibly, that could be a deterrent if the owner's not always there and the manager didn't do the training.
Right.
But they're the one there. And then they might just be like, we're just not gonna
Not going to do it.
yeah.
Or maybe they'll all do the Bassett training, and that's what we would hope for, certainly.
Okay.
And then Alderman Smith?
Yes, so why am I thinking that we already did this a while ago? We talked about this and there was discussion on it, and I know that salons that are serving alcohol, so I thought this was something that had occurred at least a year or more ago.
I think your memory is correct. So what we approved is the concept under the title of complementary. So what we are, kind of a two-part question, two-part response. The complementary alcohol service was the prior title.
Okay.
So we're talking about the same concept.
Okay.
Just we're talking about changing the title because the state doesn't appreciate people or allow people to give away alcohol. So we're removing the language that the state doesn't like. But I have also heard that it is perhaps a practice of maybe some salons to do this. So to go to Alderman Bugg's statement, if we can get this out there maybe under a different title even, as the barbershop, salon, or spa license, it may also encourage those who maybe aren't aware that it's a barbershop, salon, spa license to participate in the license as opposed to perhaps not being licensed.
Okay, thank you.
And then just to clarify too, they have to go through the same liquor license process. They're gonna have dram shop insurance. I heard you talk about Bassett, and they're gonna be withheld or held to the same standard as a restaurant/bar that has this license as well too, correct?
They are just, they don't have to have food,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
I mean, as far as inspections and things like that, yeah, so, perfect, so.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Second.
Had a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, an ordinance amending Chapter 6, Sections 6-5, 6-7, and 6-20 of the Code of Ordinances. Welcome back.
Back again, thank you. Jennifer Stallings, City Clerk. So with this presentation, I have a very, very, very short PowerPoint to show you because while I was going through what I wanted to present to you, I realized there were a lot of words involved, and I thought maybe it would be better just to put in a picture. So what we're trying to do here is we are proposing to remove the requirement that all liquor licensed establishment managers have to have a background check through the city of Aurora. So currently, we have the requirement that when you initially apply for your liquor license, you have to have the owners and the officers, corporation or business, they have to have background checks, and then any managers. So That, every 3 years, that has to be renewed. So with the renewal of your license, you know, we check every year. I know Dave, our business compliance officer, is in the audience, and he has done a lot of work on making sure that people are compliant with that requirement. And then when there's any kind of change in manager, owner, or officer, they are also required to obtain a background check. So the reason that we do that is because people with certain offenses in their backgrounds aren't allowed, started with the state law. We generally, and I'll show you in a later slide, follow along with the state law with respect to who is prohibited from holding a license based upon their background or what criminal history that they have. And the first column is the state of Illinois law. Second is our code of ordinances. Just very generally, felony convictions prohibit prostitution offenses. Alcohol convictions, we on a local level prohibit some DUIs. Again, this is very high level, but gambling convictions and DUIs within 5 years. So you may recall we do have a provision in the code that allows for someone with these offenses in their backgrounds to appeal to the liquor commissioner to ask that they be found rehabilitated. So there is a way to ask to be found rehabilitated if you do have these offenses in your background. However, what we are asking here is that we just remove the requirement for managers. What we're finding is that with almost 210 liquor licenses out there right now through the city, we've got manager turnover. We have meetings with the mayor and with liquor licensees. After our last meeting last year, we've had a restaurant owner who has expressed a lot of concern with the fact that we have that requirement because some of the small restaurants have a lot of turnover with managers, and it is a big ask of them to have each of their managers go out and be background checked every time they're hired, because they do their own type of background check on their managers. So then they're required to do 2 background checks. So the question being, why do we do them? Why do we as a city ask for background checks for managers? I think it's just been there. It's been a requirement that we've asked for managers. I don't know when it started. It's been there since long before I've been the city clerk, but I did speak with the Liquor Control Commission. They allow us to do it, but we don't have to. And so the ultimate responsibility is on the applicant to ensure that when they are submitting an application for a liquor license, that they are being truthful. And so on the state application, it says, do you have a felony? You have to answer truthfully. So while we feel it's important to properly vet the operators of our businesses, the owners, the officers, we feel that it is, if we've properly vetted our owners and officers, then we should be able to trust that they can properly vet their employees, and that being their managers. So without going through all of the proposed changes that you've probably already looked at in to the code, we've really just gone through and marked it up to remove the requirement of location manager getting a background check. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Franco?
So, owners, yes for background checks. Officers, yes for background checks. Because we vetted them, and it's their responsibility if something goes awry, we feel it's comfortable that they will make sure their managers do the right thing because they've been vetted and have background checks. So the responsibility is going to fall to them if something happens.
That is our thing.
I mean, that's the philosophy.
Yes.
All right, that's just, I just wanna
Background
make
and
sure that.
fingerprints as
Yeah.
well, too, along with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the fingerprints that we get, I don't, but we send them to the private company to have their fingerprints done and sent to the Illinois State Police, and they return a background check from the FBI and the ISP to us, so.
I've never done that, so.
Quick question.
Okay.
Alderman Smith?
Not that it
I was
matters
kidding.
in us
Chris.
making our decision, but just for information purposes, what do the other municipalities around us do? Do they do this?
Yeah, so in the memo.
Is it in there? I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, but it doesn't stand out that well. I didn't put it in a chart or anything, but it does seem that several, I think I only compared 5 of them, but if you look at St. Charles, they ask for fingerprints and an affidavit, and that's kind of how we are proposing to hold the owners responsible for, their vetting of their employees is creating an affidavit so that they know they're going to read the affidavit. It's going to say, I, on behalf of my business, affirm that I have done the background check or looked into the background of this manager, and he is or she is eligible to serve as a manager for this location. So, that's what we are looking to do, and that's what it seems like a lot of them do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah.
Alderman Bug?
Thank you. So it seems like the impetus of this, for the most part, was that, the double background check. So them doing it themselves and then us asking them to do a second one. So that's 2. I don't want to go back to the point where there are 0. So we assume the owner is going to do a background check on the manager. We're not going to require it now, but if they don't, we've gone from 2 to 0.
Mm-hmm.
So just in reading this whole thing, if we just said to the owner, you're doing a background check on your manager, forward us a copy of that background check. We're not going to ask you to do a second one, but you're doing one. Please forward us, well, not please, but do forward us a copy of that. We have it on file, and then we don't even need to 3 years from now ask for a second one. We just have one on file. They did it. It's done. Go have a great business. Yeah. So I just in looking the whole thing, I'm just more comfortable with that than, like I said, just assuming the owner at that point is going to do it. If they don't do it, then our managers aren't getting checked at all.
Right. Well, I think just 2 responses to that. One being, and I don't know the limitations on what a private person can share with their background. Obviously, if they're applying for a license with us, we can require them to do certain things if they are expecting to obtain a license. But I can say from my perspective, we are extremely it's regulated very heavily as to what we can do with background checks, and who can even be in the room with them. We have to have significant training as far as even staff, just who's around them. So I think that is something that we would obviously be able to look into, and it makes perfect sense. If they're telling us that they're doing background checks, then what's the harm there? The second is that the affidavit that I was discussing, as opposed to, or if it is not feasible for them to provide us with the actual background check, the affidavit could be fashioned to say, I, business owner, completed a background check and hereby swear or affirm that my employee is eligible to act as manager in a liquor license establishment, or something to that effect. So while we wouldn't be holding someone's background check, we would have the licensee affirming or attesting to the fact that they've done it, and then subject to some violations that we put in there, we proposed if it's not true.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand, of course, there's confidentiality and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, I definitely feel what you're saying, and if it is my business, I go out and hire ABC company to do the background check, and they just send a one-page document that says ABC company did a background check on Joe Smith, and Joe Smith has no felonies, da-da-da-da. It's done.
Yep.
You know, not digging, we don't need to know all the ins and outs of the end result. That company, that's what they do for business. So they just say, we did the background check and he passed. He has no felonies, he's of good moral character, whatever we're asking.
Alderman Pringle?
Is it mandatory that an owner, when they hire a manager, does a background check on that manager?
It is not mandatory that they do a background check on the manager, but when they are, so part of the memo, I believe, that the whole train of thought there is that it is mandatory in the law that anyone who is an owner or an officer, or anyone who is acting as a manager in a liquor license establishment has to have the same qualifications as someone who is an owner or an officer, meaning that they can't have any disqualifying criminal offenses in their background. So when they're saying that they are affirming or swearing or attesting to the fact that they don't, they're putting themselves on the line by attesting to the fact on their application that their managers don't.
Well, so I'm trying to figure out, when Alderman Bugg said that, if there's no mandate, how do we get information that's not even available? Because they are just saying, you have a felony? No, okay, we're good. And then they're off, then that manager's off the hook because the guy asked them, there's no paperwork there.
Right.
So how would you get, what information could you get if there's no mandatory requirement to say, you got a felony, no, we're going? So I don't know how that would even play into the process unless it's a mandatory thing. Then there has to be a paper trail, hence we would get it. So I'm not sure how we would even do that.
Okay.
Do you agree? If
Yeah,
there's no
no, I
mandatory,
understand.
how do you follow the paperwork?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that what we also need to ask is it more important to the business owner that the person running the business in their place is qualified to do so than it is for us? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Well, go, you probably know
Yeah.
better than most. Right.
So initially, where somebody came to you and said that getting a background check on managers due to turnover is cumbersome and time-consuming and expensive. And then, so we were trying to accommodate, saying that they can do it themselves, or like, we were just gonna put the onus on them and let
Yep,
them.
yep.
So they weren't required to, they can just, through the interview process and things like that, say, do you have a felony, do you this? And if they say no, then we assume that they're telling the truth and hiring that, so. Which I agree with, is at some point as a business owner, you have to be responsible, whether it's the manager serving in charge of the whole place or the server serving the liquor. Everybody has a responsibility of not over-serving, not doing this, not doing that. So I would agree with putting the onus on the owner, whether he or she chooses to do a background check, to do enough research that he or she's comfortable saying, this person's in charge of my business and meets all the requirements, because the fine or the penalty for having somebody there, it could be painful, I'm sure, so they lose their liquor license. So, because if we require them to, in my opinion, we force them not to tell us then, because if we say, okay, every time you change a manager, you got to let us know, that's never going to happen, because, speaking from personal experience, we'll go through 6 or 7, in a month or in a year sometimes, so we're assuming that they're going to tell us every single time, Joe Smith is gone, now it's, John Smith or whatever like that.
Yeah.
So I think the onus on the owner, I think, is a good thing, is so, because the threat of losing their liquor license is huge. I've always told it's a privilege, not a right, to have a liquor license, and you have to adhere to the rules and laws and stuff. And the rule and law is that you can't have a felony and a few other things and be the manager of a restaurant or bar. So, because to me, we're not eliminating anything if we still require a background check. If we say you got to give it to us, well, then we might as well just make it part of the application, because we're not saving them any time or any, or I don't want to say any money, but saving time more than anything. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. If they're gonna trust their manager, why would we not trust them? Because it's their business. They lose their business,
Right.
ouch. So if they're not doing paperwork, then we can't ask for paperwork because there's none available. So I don't know that we want to get into fragmented things. Some have paperwork, some not. You guys are on, it's on you. Your business goes, if your manager screws up, bye-bye, and it's on you. So I think that's enough to keep the business going, I would think, and you would
I would
probably
agree, yeah.
agree with me on that one, right?
I think to Alderman Bug's point, though, I think that making the process very clear to them as far as what is expected of them and what the penalties are is very important.
Yeah, because they are already going through the process. If you have, as Alderman Warman said, if you go through 6 or 7 managers in a year, every one of those managers has to do that training by state law. So we're not just getting somebody off the street to come in and manage our liquor establishment. I mean, you already have to mandatorily go through the training to be a manager of a liquor establishment. So,
You were referring to the Bassett training, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, that, yeah, the owner's already going through the process with the manager. Like I say, you just don't pull somebody off the street.
Right.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think language that shows them how important it is. And, you know, it is easy for the, well, I say easy, for the owner, if they're going through the training, you know, the next step is just whatever. Find out that your person doesn't have any felonies.
And then correct me if I'm wrong too, if everybody goes through Bassett training, that's part of the liquor license renewal process as well too, so you're supposed to turn in copies
Yep.
along with that as well too, so we'll maintain records that way as well, so.
I have a question.
Alderman Burrell, yeah.
Is the background checks part of the state license process?
Nope, the state, the instruction that I received from them was that they give the municipalities the authority to request or, I don't want to say make, but to request background checks, but it's not mandatory. So but they kind of leave, I've always explained it as the state leaves that portion to us. You know, kind of some of the legwork on that to us.
And honestly, getting the state license is fairly quick. I mean, they rely on the city.
Mhm.
Like I've gotten the city liquor license at 10 a.m. and had a state liquor license by 4 p.m., you know, that same day. So, so they rely on the city quite a bit to make sure that the, you know, T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and because they're again, they put the onus on the owner if you make a mistake. You know, I think they check to make sure you paid your taxes and one other thing, and I think that's it. Then here you go. So
I lean towards the chairman here because the chairman is a business owner of said businesses that we're talking about. So I believe that we've kind of talked this all the way through, and do you think that this is
I
the way
personally,
to go? And your opinion is very valuable because this is the work that you do outside of being an alderman. So I think that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we should move forward.
and I agree with like how it's written, and I agree with Alderman Bug too, is that there's part of the application process. You know, this is, you're agreeing that whoever you put in charge matches this criteria, and here's what happens if we find out they don't. Or so I would agree with something like that.
That's just checking a box.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, or no, like something saying
Another
that,
question.
you know, by penalty or whatever, if,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that I
An
would agree with.
affidavit of some sort.
So, you know, ignorance is not an excuse to break a law, but that way there's no reason not to know what would happen. So, but I like it as written, is my personal opinion, so.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? A motion by Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. As I stated, the next two, 845 and 847, we're going to skip. So we'll go right to, or not skip, we're moving to the end. So next item is 24-0765, a resolution approving the appointment of Kevin Muhammad and the reappointment of Frank Johnson and Joseph L. Grissom III to the Aurora Housing Authority Board.
Good afternoon, Rep Committee. Alex Voigt with the Mayor's Office. What you have before you represents two reappointments. Frank Johnson and Joe Grissom will both be, if approved, will be serving their 4th terms, and Kevin Mohammed is a new recommendation. He is a 6th Ward resident, and this would be obviously his 1st term. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
if this is approved, this will fill up the board.
Question.
Questions?
So I looked at Kevin Mohammed's resume.
Mhm.
I didn't see anything in there that would lead me to being an AHA member. What do we know about him that makes him because I don't see anything that gives him any experience or anything that he can contribute based on what we saw on paper.
Sure. So Kevin Mohammed was a referral, a recommendation that was made to the mayor's office as a candidate. We have had a vacancy for quite some time. And in terms of direct experience that would lend you to be a good board member for the AHA, none of the other candidates had direct ties. They were people that were interested in serving the community, interested in being involved in housing issues. So in terms of a direct tie, that's not a requirement for this board. We're looking for people that are going to attend meetings, participate, and those sorts of things. So, but this one was a referral.
Right, and that's fine. I mean, I've seen that before too. So we feel that those other things are good enough. We feel that he possesses that he'll come to meetings, be a good board member, because something's got to bring you to the table. We can reference anybody, but if they don't really have experience, or we don't think they're going to be a good board member, they're not going to make meetings, obviously we're not going to take them. So,
Correct.
so we feel that he's going to be part of the other part.
Yes.
Okay.
And if, for some reason, like any board member, they are not, we do have some
Right.
ability to remove people
Okay.
if needed.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So
Any-
moved.
Any other questions, comments? Did I have a motion by Alderman Bug?
Second.
And a second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 24-0769, a resolution approving the reappointments of William Whitfield, Cynthia Latimer, and Mark Dale Jr. to the African American Heritage Advisory Board.
Yes, thank you. This item represents 3 reappointments. All are 2, this will be their 2nd term, and 1, this would be his 5th term. But all are outstanding members of this board.
Second.
Any other questions, comments?
Just if
Alderman Bug?
there's any other vacancies available.
We do not. This board is actually full.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yay.
Motion by Alderman Smith, was second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 24-0828, a resolution authorizing the reappointments of Albert Signorelli, Michael Saudi, Spiros Kopulios, and Janice Lindley to the Grand Army of the Republic.
So moved.
Yes, these are all reappointments, all longstanding members. And those of you that have been on the council for a while, this board had substantial vacancies for a number of years, but it is full. So we're very happy that these 4 individuals are willing to continue serving.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
So when we're reappointing someone to whatever board we may be discussing, what is the criteria you look for as a reappointment, other than just, I want to stay on? I mean, do you look and see what the attendance level,
Oh, we do.
the participation
Yes.
level? Okay.
Yep, attendance and participation. What we typically do is we speak to the staff liaison to find out if this individual attends meetings, participates. That's the biggest piece. Are they
Makes sense.
an active board member? And if they are, we're always happy to reappoint people.
Thank you, that makes good sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And I had a motion, Alderman Franco, or Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Was this, you still want this one? You want to go now, or, okay. Next item on the agenda, 24-0834. Resolution authorizing the department heads of the city to enter into agreements with public agencies for access to certain data thereof.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Rick Vanstra, Corporation Counsel. The item before you, 24834, is a resolution that would allow a department head to enter on behalf of the city into a data exchange agreement with an external governmental entity. This matter came up recently when the law department was asked to renew its access to the Secretary of State driver information, which we do use in the enforcement of our traffic ordinances by our prosecutors. The request this time, different than it had been before, was that the request be made on behalf of the city as opposed to be on the department. While I can do things and bind the law department, there are certain things that I cannot do without permission of the city council. And there are things that other department heads would not be able to do without the permission of the city council. So what this essentially does, it does grant limited authority for a department head to enter into an agreement such as this with a public agency. But before that happens, the chief information security officer needs to take a look at the proposed agreement to make sure that the obligations placed on the city are within our technical competency to adhere to, which in most cases we will be able to, and also to have the law department review it as to form and as to our ability to perform our side of that agreement.
And just to clarify, this is the item that's going to count later on
That
today.
is correct.
Yeah. Any questions or comments from the council or committee?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 24-0840, a resolution appointing 6 members to the Aging and Community Advisory Board, AICB.
Good afternoon, Alex Voigt with the Mayor's Office. Joining me for this item is Katrina Boatwright, our Manager of Senior and Disability Services. So this item before you represents the 6 inaugural appointments to the Aging and Community Advisory Board. If you will recall, this board was created by the City Council in March of 2024. So this period of time to bring forward applications has been much longer than is typical. But we wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to vet people, meet them, and have a good initial pool. So the candidates before you, we decided to start with 6 versus bringing forward the full board. And the reason for that is we are hoping to drum up some more applications from community members. So we do have very strong agency representation right now. 4 of the 6 work for agencies that serve this population. And 3 of the 6 work with Katrina on a task force that she has created. So these are individuals that we know that they'll be able to hit the ground running and really do the work that we're looking for them to do. But one of the things that we feel is very important is to have community members who are aging in our community. So that's something that we're hoping that getting these initial appointments through will drum up some more attention and we will field some more applications. We are very pleased to have Mr. George Scowens, who most of you know, who has agreed to be nominated as a board member. He's a very active community member and previously served on the Block Grant Working Committee, so he has great board experience. And Katrina is here as well if you have any specific questions for her.
I just had a comment. I was positive that Mr. Scowens was a resident of Ward 1.
I believe with the remap, he's now in Ward 10, but I'll double check. I will double check.
Okay,
I will check that.
thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a question. So
Alderman Smith?
out of these 6, I know you said a lot of them were part of agencies. How many are Aurora residents?
Only 2 of the 6.
2 of the 6.
Yes, and that's where the agency representation is critical. It is listed in the memo, but we have Jennifer Brassfield, who is the Executive Director of Riverwalk Adult Day Services in Naperville, which does serve Aurora residents, and she's been very involved with Ms. Boatwright's task force. We have Esmeralda Tellner, who is a retired APD Elderly Resource Officer, very passionate individual with a lot of knowledge and experience of the Aurora community. We have Alex Hahi, who is the Executive Director of Plum Landing. And then Glenda Love, who works for Age Guide, which serves several counties, but the ones that she serves all 4 of our counties here in Aurora. And again, a task force member, as is Alex.
Sounds like you got a good group going
Good
there.
crew, yes.
Add, throw some residents in there, I think you'll have a really good, strong board committee.
I would
it's
agree,
starting
yes.
off really great.
Yeah.
We're excited about it and definitely looking for some stronger community members that are seniors too. And perhaps a passionate caregiver that can keep that caregiver perspective, and that helps us advise this committee also.
I nominate Alderman Franco.
I just was gonna ask if they shovel snow at all.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, and I believe this just stays at committee level, doesn't move on to city council after this. So, next item, 24-0831, a resolution authorizing a 2-year grant program in the amount of $50,000 per year in a partnership with Rebuilding Together Aurora, RTA, to assist qualified residents with projects in the First Ward.
Yes, this is, as you know, I'm trying to get acclimated to the new role here, so kind of been asking around what are some programs that other ward aldermen are doing, and this is a program that's been working in the 3rd Ward, and so it's a great partnership working with Rebuilding Together Aurora, where they act as they take care of the whole process. They work with the residents, and so if there's an applicant in Ward 1, they would vet them the same way they would through the normal process, and if they are a resident of Ward 1, and if they don't have any resources to totally take care of the needs of this resident, then ward funds could be utilized. So they're not the first dollars in, but they're there to help meet and fill any gaps.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So it is a 2-year grant program, but it's 50 grand. We only get 75 grand. So is that 25 per year?
It would be coming out of fund balance, out of the ward fund balances. So this is just
Can we do that if it's not for infrastructure? Because I thought the fund balances was for infrastructure.
It is. So, yeah, I was
I mean,
hoping
here's
we're
the
gonna
other
talk
thing.
about all 3 of them, because I kind of wanted to look at the combined, how.
The
this
issue
gonna work.
is, the other issue is too, is they said that these stay with my term. I'm not sure, I didn't draft this, the law department did.
Yeah.
But, my understanding is that if I don't come back in April, it ends, then if there's a new alderman, they have to restart it.
Sure.
So there's a program in here that was adopted under Lamas, but because he left, then I have to restart it. And so that's all I'm trying to do, is to get the authority to spend the dollars.
So it's
Well,
just something you already had in place, sorry. Something you had in
One of
place.
them.
Yeah, one of them, okay.
So I guess where I'm confused, and perhaps we need to, like Alderman Franco said, talk about all 3 of them.
I think.
Just because you have the money in your fund balance doesn't mean you can just start spending it all on,
Other than capital projects.
that money's supposed to be for capital projects, infrastructure projects. So I know the rest of us that do grants, and I'm not saying this is wrong.
I'm new, so I'm
No,
just.
I'm not saying this is wrong, I
No,
just wanted to
right.
talk about, the rest of us that do grants, it's more of a beautification type program, of a grant type program. Alderman Bug, yours is different completely yet, but,
I was just following the template of Ward 3.
Right, so, well, let me ask you another question. Can we read all 3 of
Yeah,
these? Because
I'll
I
read-
kind of want to
I'll
break
read the
down,
other two.
Thank
grant
you.
programs are great, but I just
No.
kind of want to talk about bundled a little bit.
So I'll read the other 2 on the record here so we can discuss. So 24-0835, a resolution authorizing the Ward 1 residential and nonprofit grant program And 24-0837, a resolution authorizing the Ward 1 Business Grant Program 50/50 match up to $5,000 per project per year for any qualifying businesses for the purposes of upgrading or improving the exterior of their property.
Yeah, so the one that was part of Ward 1 is the third one, the business grant 50/50, the exterior match program. And so this one ended with the change in alderman. So that
Right.
one had to continue, that one had to be redone. And so that was something that I heard would be desired and be of interest in the ward.
I guess
So that
I
one-
don't understand why you're doing 3 grant programs at one time.
Because they touch different things. They don't all do, they're not just wide. One is for business facades. One is residential or community neighborhood, beautification type
Right,
projects.
right, right.
Like this one's patterned after the one you have,
Right.
Alderman Smith. And the other one is working with RTA to help, provide additional dollars for something that Rebuilding Together Aurora does. But for residents in Ward 1, similar to the program in Ward 3.
So let me ask a question. If everybody took advantage to the max on all of these in a year period, what would that be in your budget? Because I know you got a cap on, you got 50,000 in one, you got 25,000 in another. The third one, which was the 50/50 business one, $5,000 per project, does that have a cap?
25,000 for the residential
Right,
and nonprofit grant program. That's 25.
right.
And
So at 0837, what would be the
the
cap?
RTA one is 50,000.
Right.
So, and like I said, it's that's 50,000, but the way this is written, it's a 2-year.
So it's 25 a year.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
okay, so, all right,
Is
that,
it
okay.
broken down to 25 per year?
Well,
Or is it
are we talking about 0831? I'm just trying to make sure we're on the right one here.
50,000 is what you just said?
If we're talking about 0831, it says 50,000 per year.
No. Okay, yeah, 50,000 per.
All right, so what I'm just trying to say is you got 50,000, that one, the one below it, you got 25, the one below that, I don't know how much total.
Is there a
I'm just
cap?
trying to see, if you're getting $75,000 a year, I'm just trying to do the math, and everybody takes advantage of it in a given year,
Yeah.
are you gonna exceed, that type of thing? Now,
Now,
typically, a grant you don't.
To be
but-
honest with you, I don't think they're gonna go through that kind of dollars.
Okay.
I think the business grant, I think they
But
gave
it's
out
there.
one.
It's there, they could. You
Right,
can't, once
yeah.
you put it out there, they can. So I think that there needs to be some more discussion on this. I think that this is really a very, this is beyond, and not that you can't do what anybody else is doing, but this is like, I didn't know I could take $50,000 out of my other funds and use them for, with the Building Together Aurora to
I mean,
assist
I'm willing to
in-
retract.
Yeah, I
retract
just,
any of these, so.
and believe me,
No,
the
no,
sentiment is all
I'm
good. We're just
yeah.
trying to
I'm
make
just-
the math work as much
Like I
as
said,
we
I was
can.
just trying to follow
Sure,
what
right.
other,
I think
what
Rich
other
can
ward aldermen were doing.
some clarity on this, so.
Yeah.
This was,
Here, I think,
I mean, I can
you
change the dollar
started-
amount. and
Yeah,
if that
I think
makes
you started to say, Carl, or maybe it's, you were both talking there. You have to set up the programs
Right.
first.
Sure.
If people apply and they only spend 2,000 the first one, 2,000 the second one, 2,000 third one, then that's what's spent. If he spends all 25 this first year on the first one, then the funds aren't there for the next two.
Yeah, it's gone.
So it's just budgeting, but you have the programs available to the people.
But we have limits on how much money we can use for this stuff,
Yeah, I think,
according to our budget
Right,
limits.
and then if the money isn't there, it doesn't go out. But if, I'm saying, you cannot, you don't have the opportunity to be in the program if you don't set it up.
and so initially.
So
I
once
set the program up and then the budget's.
right, once you get to the max of your money,
Well, Yeah,
then
Let's let Rich chime in here, so.
I just want to say, Rich Jacobs, Chief of Staff, Office of Alderman. I would have to look up the exact date, but it was 2 months ago, maybe 3, that Alderman Mesiacos came before you for the RTA grant. It's the same grant, but for Ward 1. And he has the funds. We would not let any alderperson submit grant proposals for consideration if they did not have funds in their ward fund area.
Can I
So-
ask you a question on that?
Sure.
So does it not matter, and this is sincerely a question, because, I mean, I could go back and start over again too after looking at this. Does it not matter how those funds are used? Because there was a big deal earlier this year or last year, whenever it was, about how we split up our funds, what's to be used in
Well,
what
if you recall,
bucket.
Alderman Yamas, he ended with, at 6 months of his year,
Mhm.
he did not expend a lot of money in his grant program, so there was already funds that he had allocated in order to have access to those funds, because it ends with the term of the alderperson. Alderman Barrero has to do this,
Right.
come before RAP, to reinstate it under his tenure.
Which was the second one, really, which is the 0835 is the one that.
And these
that-
also are part of the next year's budget, but I have to get it approved now.
I'm just trying to understand, and I can take this offline if it's important.
We
I
would be
didn't
happy
know
to
we
go
could
through all of,
use-
I would be
use
happy
our
to
money
go
like
through
this.
all of this
Right.
offline and come back at a next wrap to explain further.
Yeah.
I don't have anything on me right now
You
to
okay
do
with that,
this.
Holt?
If you want to post, we can huddle and
Yeah.
make sure this is all.
I think this is absolutely, just to be real clear, I think, it's a very common statement lately. I think that this is a wonderful thing. I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're doing this. I just didn't know that I could dig into my finances and use that amount of money unless it was going very specifically for very specific things. So could be the wrong, one is completely off base and wrong here, and I'm certainly willing to admit that, but I'm very confused by the usage of the funds when we have spent so much time about taking that 75 and breaking it down to 25 and 50. And then if it doesn't get used in one year, it funnels back into your overall fund, so.
Well, what I can say, and again, I don't have all the information in front of me, if Alderman Barrero needed to go into his ward fund balance, he would also have to come before finance for a budget amendment to allow him to do that, and that's not happening. He does not need to do that. So the funds are in Ward 1 right now. We, again, I don't have the information in front of me, but happy to go over it with each of you offline and then present whatever at the next, a report, or provide a report to RAP at the next RAP.
We're not here to approve this, are we? This is just for information only? Do we-
We'll approve it, but it ends here with the approval.
Yeah,
Correct.
the approval
Yeah.
process stops.
Do you want to
here,
just
yeah.
hold it here as we get more?
I'm willing to follow, if the other people.
I mean, if
I
you're
don't
okay
think
with-
that there's anything wrong with what you're doing, I just want to know more
Can we
about
just hold
it.
it here and we'll make sure we dot our i's, cross our t's?
But I have some other questions in addition to this.
Okay.
So, if you've modeled it after some grant programs, I can't comment on the first one because I'm not part of that. The second one, 0835, resolution authorized Aurora residential, there's no buy-in by the homeowners to put in any money, the entities, it's just 100% grant, you're not,
I
no
was
split.
patterning this after.
Okay,
Alderman Smith
okay,
asked,
all right.
That's how mine
Okay,
is.
all right.
so I'm
And
not-
then-
I'm not
no, that's fine.
Reinventing the
No,
wheel
no,
here.
And
no.
then I always would suggest, like, the third one, that there's no cap on that. I don't know why you wouldn't put a cap to say, I'm not going over 30,000 or 40,000, 50, just so you know, because I think what you don't want to do, and it may not ever materialize, you have a whole bunch of people applying and says, yeah, I'm sorry, you're out because I have no more money. But you capped it, says, we had a cap this year, we're going to roll you over the next year. I just
Which one are you talking about?
think
The
that would be
third one.
cleaner than the last one.
The third one.
The third one? 0837, that you might put a ceiling on that? Because
That
you
would-
have a ceiling on the other ones.
And that was modeled off of.
You got 50,000 on the number, first one, the second one down, you got 25. I don't know why you wouldn't have a ceiling, a cap on the third one, just have a parameter? Unless I didn't see it in there, maybe I missed it.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
The residential one,
This is the business grant one, I don't see a cap total. I see per ask, but I don't see, what if you had 100 asks?
20,000's been allocated.
Oh, 20,000, so
In
you're
the
done
re-
at
in the
20.
resolution.
All right, I just want to make sure, because that's a good thing. I always think there should be that. And then the other question I had is 0835, I guess in the context, they were talking about trees. Did you want to have trees in there? The reason I say that is because if you have a $1,000 minimum and a tree costs $375, they wouldn't reach that minimum unless they had 3 or 4 trees.
Nobody's gonna get just one tree, through my experience.
Well, yeah, but the point is, it's a $1,000 minimum to apply for it, so you would never hit that $1,000 minimum if you're doing trees, theoretically. You know what I'm saying? Because you have to have $1,000 to go in there, right? Is that correct? Anybody?
We have a tree program that people can get on a list on.
Right, but in this program, you talked about doing trees, and if your minimum amount to get in the program is $1,000, and a tree costs $375, you would never get the minimum if you wanted a tree, so you wouldn't even be able to apply for it because you're not at the minimum of $1,000.
Well, the idea is that you're trying to do a much bigger project, and it might be several trees.
It typically
Could
is.
be. Yeah, could be.
This is off of
Right,
mine. Mine
right.
is, so that's more of an HOA wanting to do beautification, and chances are,
Right.
I've never had anybody
Not
ask
just
for
one
just
tree.
one tree. This is
Right.
not a personal tree in your parkway. This
Entrance
is
or
a
something.
tree that the HOA is coming in and clearing out an area and putting new trees in, and
And we just got a $1 million grant for trees, so I don't even know why that would have to be utilized. I mean,
they're not gonna give it to HOAs. That $1 million isn't.
Oh, we can't use it for that?
I don't
Oh, I didn't know
imagine the
that.
city's gonna
Okay.
It's for
put.
parkway trees.
Yeah, they're for
the
parkway
grant
trees.
is. This is not.
This is not parkway
Parkway
trees. This is community beautification.
So they're gonna put it on private property?
Could be
Not
both.
not his
No.
program. I don't know about the city's.
Well, I'm kind of confused on that. So I know what you're saying. Yours is like an entity, an overall thing, because that's a good thing, not for a particular homeowner. But if we have a $1 million tree grant program, can we spend that for? I thought we could spend it for anything in our ward. Or we could have trees put in, wherever.
I don't know, but you're getting way off these three
Yeah.
things.
Well, no, but I'm saying, why
So let's-
why would you use that if you're gonna get the free money anyway? That's kind of what I'm saying. If you're gonna get the money, why even put in a grant program? You got the money, just throw it in there. So I guess you're
Well-
gonna jump in it.
So,
Go
just
ahead.
correction on the tree grant, that's limited to very specific census tracts, which may or may not all be in the ward, so that's not citywide. That's
Okay.
based on a very limited geographic area.
Okay.
So, and HOAs are eligible if they are in that geographic area, but
If they're
Just so-
not, then
Yeah.
they're not. Right.
Correct.
right,
I
right.
think we want to tangent here, so are we going to table this for a
Can I
couple
ask
weeks?
just one more
One more
question?
question, and then, because we got more on the agenda
So on
here.
the first one, the RTA one, is this for private homes? People can use this money to,
Yeah, so if you're a senior or disabled and you have some needs, let's say you need some ADA modifications or ramps or, certain things, they come in and they help you. I don't know if you're familiar with the RTA program.
I am, I guess,
So what they do is they're gonna take in the applicants, and if they happen to live in Ward 1, they're gonna help them. But let's say there's a shortage of funds, then this would come in and, fill the gap. And that's all that is. It's not.
so this isn't like somebody that just hasn't painted their house in 6 years and it needs to be
They have to
painted. They have to
qualify.
qualify
They have to
because
income qualify
they
or
have something,
age
they have a
qualify.
need.
Yeah, yes. It's not
This
just-
is what Masiacos has, right?
Yes.
And then the second one is what you got.
Yes.
And then the third one is new.
The business one, Lamas had it.
Yeah, it
but
was an
wasn't
existing one.
utilized very much.
Okay, all right.
And that would be working with Invest Aurora.
Okay.
And our intent is certainly not to give you a
No,
hard
no,
time
we like
about
grant
this.
programs.
We like grant
Yeah, we do.
programs.
We
I
just
said
wanna
our
make sure-
intent
yeah.
Oh, no,
is
I'm-
certainly not giving you at all.
I'm not trying
a hard
to
time.
run this. RTA would run the other
Sure.
one. And if it's in Ward 1 or Ward 3, they're working with Ward 1 or Ward 3
Ward 3, yeah.
to fill in the gaps. And then Invest Aurora would have these dollars when they're working, when businesses come in, say, hey, we have this program, and they would administer it. I wouldn't be administering it. Ben, I did have a question for you though. So you have a ward committee according to the way this
I
is
do
written?
not.
It's the way
My,
this is
it's,
written, it
we,
says the ward
no,
committee
my
would
new one
decide.
is, that's taken out, and my new one that,
So
we
you
took
had
the
yours
word
redone
committee.
with no language citing ward committee?
My latest one that we did that was approved earlier this year, I guess would have been this
That
year or
was
last year?
the- that was this
Yeah, we
year.
took the word committee language out of it.
Okay, so then I would need to redo these, if that makes sense.
Well, you could still do that. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you want, whatever you want
I
to do.
just had a hard
the way
time
this is
developing a
written-
committee and didn't find the need to really work with the committee to make the decisions that have been brought forward. Because I've worked with other people in the community, which has kind of developed its own committee. Like if I'm working with HOA, to do things that's kind of, and then a park district at one point, so that kind of developed its own little committee for that particular project, and then the next project kind of developed its own little committee.
Yeah, not
That makes
opposed to ward
sense.
committee, but I just need to work with the mechanics out.
Okay. So we all agree to table this and bring it
Yes.
back in a couple of weeks?
Yep.
Do I have to do anything procedural, or just saying that we're gonna table this works?
I think that's it. Table for further conversation?
That's so, all three.
Better term is hold.
Hold, there we go.
Yeah.
I like that better, so.
Yeah, table
So we all agree we'll
it.
hold this
Table is
until.
official, like
Just need a consensus.
Okay, so, all right, moving forward. Let's see here. Next item on the agenda, 24-0845, an ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the City of Aurora Code of Ordinances.
Oh, yes.
Good afternoon, Nydia Molina, Assistant Corporation Counsel from the Law Department.
Sergeant Thomas McGuire, member of Special Operations Group, Aurora Police Department.
Investigator Matthew Myers, member of the Special Operations Group at Aurora Police Department.
Good afternoon, committee. Today, for your consideration, we are asking or proposing an amendment to Section 29-126 of the City of Aurora Code of Ordinances. That chapter is, in Article 29-7, is a chronic nuisance abatement part of our code. If you're not familiar with the chronic nuisance abatement, in this particular chapter, it addresses repeated commission of criminal offenses and violations of the code that substantially injure the health, comfort, and safety of the public. It also deals and addresses failure of control of property that causes repeated and substantial expenditures of public funds in order to enforce state and local ordinances upon or near the property. So provisions of this article assist the city to lessen the expenditures of funds and deter property owners from adopting an inadequate management process. So what we want, or what we are proposing, is to expand the definitions of what is included as an aggravated nuisance. If you're not familiar with the nuisance abatement process, in order for a property to be in violation and declared a nuisance, there must be 2 or more instances of a nuisance activity. And a nuisance activity in the code is identified as misdemeanor or felony offenses or any violation of our code. For a property to be in violation and declared an aggravated nuisance, there has to be at least 1 instance of what is defined as an aggravated nuisance in 1 year. Our proposal is to update and include offenses that are equally as heinous and threatening to the public as part of the definition of aggravated nuisance, thereby only requiring 1 instance. So the exhibit that you have before you has cleaned up some of the language of the code to fall in line with what our criminal code is. It's changed some of the terms. And we also added a few additional offenses that we have been struggling in dealing with some of our property owners. So specifically, we did include sex offenses. Sex offenses in the criminal code would include any aggravated sexual assault, abuse, predatory criminal sexual assault, abuse of a child. We've also included a prostitution offenses, which our memo that we've provided you goes into a little bit more detail as to why that's become an issue for our Aurora Police Department and for the city. We've also included child pornography as an offense that should be included as an aggravated nuisance. And we also included aggravated criminal housing management. Before we had criminal housing management, the aggravated criminal housing management addresses when a property owner or landlord is hiding the criminal housing management issues. So we thought that was important to also incorporate it as an aggravated nuisance. And the remainder of the definitions, again, are cleanup to make sure it ensures that it matches our criminal code. And the last section, dealing with the offenses that are prohibited by Article 8 of the criminal code, specifically addresses any attempt. So any attempt of any of these enumerated crimes or offenses would also be considered an aggravated nuisance. So attempt homicide, attempt kidnapping, attempt sexual assault would also fall into this definition. So that is our proposal before the committee to expand the definitions of aggravated nuisance, clean up some of the items to assist our police department and other city departments in enforcing some of the violations that we currently see.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question.
Alderman Franco?
So, I guess officers, I'll start with you. So in the text here, it says, currently, there are several massage parlors in Aurora that are currently and/or have in the past advertised sex services. How do they advertise? Because I had one in the Fifth Ward, and I brought to police attention, this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, because there was no advertisement until I was getting a massage, and then there was kind of a strange back and forth. So I don't, how are they advertising? Because I've never seen it, because I think there's one in the Fourth Ward now that is a problem. So how do they advertise? Because that's what it says in here. I'm just kind of wondering, they're not putting it on Facebook, I'm assuming, but.
Correct. There's several that we've seen obviously pop up, but there's several websites that people who are familiar with how those massage parlors operate. There are certain websites that you can go on, and it's very quickly and easy to use. Okay. There's no fee or anything, so you can go up there and anybody can search on those websites. There's a couple of them, but you just look at the location, okay, and it'll tell you the name, it'll tell you reviews, and then it'll give you address and phone number.
Okay.
So what do you, not that I want to know, but what is it you're searching? So if you go in to search for, you're looking for a massage with a happy ending? I mean, what?
There's certain websites that once you start looking for something like that, then the website will populate, because something similar to that, obviously, that you're searching, you're looking for that. So, but there's like rubmaps.com is a website where you can go on there and you can look at the massage parlors that are in the city that you're looking at, county. It's all over. We've got people that come from out of state that have actually, while they're traveling for business, they've actually come and searched those massage parlors that do those types of things. They've searched that and found it in the city.
Wow.
So prior to us suggesting this new ordinance, 2 times you had to catch somebody in a massage parlor doing something illegal before you could find them? Is that what it was? First time you get off free, the second time, no, but now we're gonna make it just 1 time, you gotta go.
For the property owners, correct. So
Okay.
we would need 2 instances of an arrest or citation in order to be referred to the law department. Once we get them, then we process those and set them before a hearing officer, but it would require 2.
Okay.
Which becomes a problem for our
Sure.
officers, because in their experience, after the first one, they may close and then they move to a different location. And so
Right,
now
yeah.
we're starting from scratch.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
So moved.
Yeah,
Second.
I'm still trying to, yeah.
Get to the happy ending.
So, right now, and I'm thinking about what has practically, realistically happened. So right now, when one of these things happens, I don't know, who closes it for a short time? Is that building and permits? I mean, when you go up to the business and there's a yellow, orange sticker, whatever, this is temporarily closed, or who does that? Is it the police or the law department, or?
Neither of us. So it could be for a building code violation. It could be a property standards issue that closes it. When we typically get referrals, if there's not a building code issue, it doesn't get shut down in that moment. So the business continues to
Operate.
operate, keep
Okay.
the officers may be able to arrest for prostitution, solicitation, for those crimes, but in terms of the business staying open, it would remain open.
Okay, so, and again, I'm talking realistic, what actually happened. So evidently there was a situation in a business and we responded as we should, and that business got closed, so we must have found some building code things?
I would imagine, I'm not sure, it could be a fire code issue as well, so it just depends on who issued that
Okay.
particular sticker or what it was. It could be a county issue as well.
No, it was after we took care of business. Okay, so, I mean, in my mind, I understand a little bit more, so, yeah, I'm all, if we just need one instance to create a nuisance, and
Perfect. I agree.
let it be.
Any other questions, comments from the committee?
We haven't.
I had a motion by.
Motion, I made a motion.
Motion by Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 24-0847, an ordinance amending Chapter 22, harassment and discrimination by specifically adding Article 22 I forget my Roman numerals of 4, reasonable accommodation process.
Good afternoon, Committee. Nydia Molina, Assistant Corporation Counsel from the Law Department. Today, for your consideration, we are asking to add Article 22-4, the reasonable accommodation policy. I think there is a PowerPoint. There we go. Just in terms of background, the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988 were amended to include certain disabilities and certain protections for peoples with disabilities. The Fair Housing Amendments Act was passed in 1968 to provide those constitutional limits for fair housing throughout the United States. And like I mentioned, in 1988, it extended those protections with peoples with disabilities. The Fair Housing Act makes it unlawful to discriminate in the sale, rental, or otherwise make an unavailable or denied dwelling to any buyer or renter because of the disabilities that they may endure. The Americans with Disabilities Act also protects, obviously, Americans with disabilities. It also indicates that no qualified individual with a disability shall, by reason of such disability, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of services, programs, or activities of a public entity or be subject to discrimination by such entity. So in reviewing those two amendments, the purpose of this proposal is to provide persons with disabilities reasonable accommodations to the city's zoning rules, policies, and procedures. It's a process that we are asking to codify within our ordinance as to how someone with a disability may request a reasonable accommodation. The individual, the person with a disability, may be asking or making a request for a reasonable combination because either the city zoning rules, property maintenance rules may not be conducive to their housing needs or dwelling needs. And so we needed to find a way for an individual with disabilities to make that request of the city and make it a process that was codified and that we had specific steps and that we made it clear what the process was going to be, and also provide our residents with an expectation of what city staff was to respond to them. And so this is our proposal as to how we are codifying that process. The proposal in the packet is that obviously the process itself will be public or be published. Will be posted. So it would be posted in City Hall, it would be posted on a website. It would also be available to anyone who inquires as to how, if I'm a person with a disability, how do I request a reasonable accommodation from the city? A couple different definitions that I just wanted to highlight was that our hearing officer that is mentioned in the proposal is the same. It mirrors how we pick and choose any hearing officer within the Code of Ordinances. So it's under Chapter 3. It would be an attorney who's licensed in good standing in the state of Illinois. The other definition that to highlight was what a reasonable accommodation is. And so we wanted to make sure that that was specifically defined in the proposal. So how does someone go about requesting an accommodation? We have prepared an application, and the application is also very detailed on what is being specifically requested and also requests supporting information. That application and supporting information would be submitted to our zoning administrator, who would then refer it to the law department to then provide to the hearing officer. The application would include the name and address of the person or entity requesting the accommodation. It would include the address of the property. It would include the designation of the application or the applicant. So are you applying on behalf of yourself, the individual, on behalf of a group, on behalf of an organization? It would also require to describe the disability at issue and the requested accommodation. So you as the applicant would have the burden of telling us what accommodation you're requesting and what specific regulation or policy you are requesting the accommodation for, either zoning or a specific rental or a property code accommodation or request for accommodation. It would also require that they describe specifically how this accommodation would meet the needs of the individual, and is it necessary for their use or to make provisions for their housing so it's financially feasible and practically usable for them. As I mentioned, this application that's gets submitted to the hearing officer. A hearing officer would be an attorney who, in this particular ordinance, are factors that the hearing officer would be required to take into account when making a decision. Some of the factors are whether the property will be used by a person with a disability. So the hearing officer will be the one who will determine whether or not the person who's applying does fit under the FHA or ADA definitions of a person with a disability. He would also factor into is a reasonable accommodation necessary to make the dwelling available to the person with a disability. They would also have to consider whether or not the reasonable accommodation poses an undue financial or administrative burden on the city, and would have to take that into account. The hearing officer would also review whether or not will the reasonable accommodation require a fundamental alteration in the nature of the city's programs or other ordinances. As I mentioned, the hearing officer is the one who reviews the request for the accommodation. But city staff, as we have put in the proposal, would also be able to submit relevant information that we believe would be necessary for a hearing officer to consider. And it also requests that the hearing officer incorporate what material the city staff provided when they're making the decision and how that factored or did not factor into his final decision. The hearing officer can either grant the reasonable accommodation or grant the reasonable accommodation with alterations or modifications. The hearing officer could also deny the reasonable accommodation. The applicant is not prohibited from reapplying if there's additional grounds or has changed in circumstances. And as in other parts of our ordinance, the applicant would also have appeal rights. So it would be a final order for a hearing officer, which then could be taken to our circuit court or federal grounds if necessary. But that is it's put into our ordinance proposal. In terms of timeline, which we thought was very important to have codified, is within 10 days of receiving the application, staff is instructed to submit in writing to the applicant that we acknowledge your receipt of your application. The hearing officer would have 45 days to issue a written decision. However, if he requests additional information from the applicant has 30 days to submit that application, that requested information. Our 45 days, or the hearing officer's 45 days to review, would be stayed. If the applicant does not submit the requested information within 30 days, and the application would be withdrawn. The hearing officer could also request additional time to review the material that has been submitted, but it should not exceed more than 90 days total. So we are wanting to address these requests very quickly and efficiently, and providing guidelines for our staff and for applicants on how that process is to look. Are there any questions about our proposal?
Questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Smith?
So, interesting timing on this one, because I did get, have a resident reach out to me wanting to discuss the possibility of them, or a few of them, turning a home into making a home for multiple people with special needs to live in, and, but doing this privately. And I didn't, we were supposed to get together, and we have not done that yet. Is this something that you'd have to have rezoning to do that for, if it was a private home being purchased and accommodations may be needed within the home for the folks living in there? And would this be part of that considered reasonable accommodations? Because it is we have been a state, a community, an area of raising a lot of folks with special needs, but now they are adults and have nowhere to live, and there are not places for them to go that are state funded. So this would be a private owned. Would this fall in this? Am I going down the right alley here?
Yes, so it would be a request to potentially, a request accommodation to the zoning code.
So
It's not zoned for that particular area, but then they would have to complete the rest of that application and meet those other factors
So
as
in
well.
my continued conversation with these folks, I could utilize this and perhaps reach out for more information if I need some.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Motion to approve.
Any other questions, comments?
Second.
Questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Motion from Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other items
Motion to
before the
adjourn.
committee.
Second.
Yeah. Motion by Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned at 4:21 PM. Thanks, everyone.